Implementing land reforms, and the group was composed of Miguel, Vishnu, Zaid, Carlos, Marcela, Benito as a support, and myself. What are lessons learned and inputs for practice for SDC positioning? I think maybe the sort of most important statement is the first one. SDC should consider land governance issues even if it's not the main area of its intervention, especially obviously when we work in decentralization, when we work in rural development, we should not be land governance blind. I think that's a very important statement. And if there is the involvement, or if we consider that, say, in decentralization, yes, the relation with land governance issues, or in, say, agricultural technology development, land governance plays an important role, then it's very important to make sure that there's an understanding of the risks, involved in land government issues, and to assess whether you may run into a risk of enhancing conflict potential in a given area. And but I think there is not much of a danger of SDC because we're not that much involved in land governance issues in most countries, but if there is international cooperation involved, then avoid over-financing of public land governance entities, especially in that, so in the end it would be mainly international cooperation who finances these institutions and not local financing that would be dominating. Imposing conditionality. I think that comes out straight from the Bolivian example where international cooperation was in fact imposing criteria like focusing on indigenous people, very small groups in the lowlands, and avoid creating parallel institutions. I think there's some classic mistakes of international cooperation and that should especially be avoided in land reform, land governance programs. The need, and I think there is certainly a strong link with many SDC programs that local governments should be more involved in land governance issues. How to support decentralized single public entity like INRA, that goes in the same direction. I mean, INRA linked to local governments in the different countries where there are land reform institutions. And they're an interesting example from Bangladesh actually, where SDC, although not being a main player in the national land reform program, provided much information through its local governance programs on land issues. And this information apparently was used then even by mainstream institutions involved with land governance. So it was I think it's an interesting case of what SDC could do even if you're not a major player in the respective issue. On SDC Bolivia, obviously that was the dominant topic of the afternoon. That's why it was also strong in our discussion that it was clear that SDC Bolivia has been focusing on rather agricultural technology, genetic resources and issues like that. But I think the first statement really applies to that it should not be land governance blind. I think that's an important message. Like a bit linked with the genetic resources, where there's a strong link actually with privileges that are given to local people, to indigenous people. Then the support to organizational strengthening. That I don't see exactly what the point was. That I think that was less related to Bolivia in this case. And then there was a suggestion that SDC might leave the mountainous areas of Bolivia and move to the lowlands, which that issue has been discussed about 100 times, and it may be discussed another 100 times.
Still not closed.
Who goes first? No, that would be the issue. Then, which issue need to be taken up in our ARD work plan? I think we had a couple of more concrete suggestions what could be done and the issues, but one was certainly that how is in SEC programs, are there examples of how information on land governance is disseminated in SEC programs? Do we have examples of local governments program who do disseminate information on land governance? That could be interesting to find out what's happening there. Is there an SEC contribution to transparency in land governance management by local governments or by national governments, or probably rather by local governments? Is there information on how to feed local experience in national policy making on land governance? So there was a general suggestion to link land governance issue to the involvement of SEC with decentralization, because decentralization, even there has been some discussion at headquarters now on the role and the importance of this in SEC programs, but it's still the main thrust of SEC in many countries, so maybe the land governance issue is best linked with this discussion. It could be an interesting link to the decentralization network. There was an interesting point also by Vishnu, I think very rightfully put in forward, is that SEC network should not encapsulate itself in itself, especially not in this issue. It was interesting, I think SEC is involved in the land coalition support of IFA, and I think it was notable that in the network discussion there was not a single contribution where information would come out of that network. That I would say is not acceptable really in this context. And if we have this kind of involvement, there should be also information coming in, flowing into the SEC networks. Again, the case studies, there could be possibilities maybe to do a case study in some cases, especially where SEC is involved in decentralization and land governance. There are 2 or 3 cases where I know of which have not been actually captured by the network discussion, like in Eastern Africa, even in Madagascar, there is involved in land governance, and it was not much covered in the exchange. So those could be part of an ARD future work plan on land governance, could be focusing on these areas. Thank you. Questions, additions from group members?
Only one point.